Good morning. Good morning. How is everyone? A little late today because Tuesdays are so hard for me. But thank you for joining me here today. Thank you for sticking with me. Also to my subscribers, I just feel like I should say thank you to the tarot people, the pick a card people, for being patient with me during this process because I am restructuring my life and I don't know where this channel is going, but I really appreciate you guys. And I do love tarot. Some, um, I have like a video waiting. I just haven't scheduled it. And I have some cards laid out and want to do a video for another pick a card, but I want to sort of build up pick a card videos before I release them so that I'm on more of a schedule so that I can be more consistent instead of being inconsistent. But also, the pick a cards, I don't know, I'm moving more into, they're kind of feeling a little superficial to me. So I just want to give like more in-depth readings and use my voice for bigger picture things, right? Although I love to help with your problems because even our small problems, like our boyfriends, our girlfriends, they affect the collective because that affects our energy, right? Our jobs, right? Getting rewarded, seeing our value, right? Seeing our worth from our work. So that affects the bigger picture, but I just want to. Good morning. I'm rambling. Good morning. Um, the bigger picture, it affects the bigger picture, but I just want to get into more hearty type of content, right? So, cuties, very controversial. If you don't know, Netflix has a feature out right now. Hold on one sec. Has a feature out right now that tells a story of young girls who are in a dance troupe, and it's very provocative, very sexualized, right? And it's very controversial. It was meant to be controversial, and there is a us versus them sort of war going on that doesn't really need to be taking place because I feel like we need to move into a space of nuance. I When we see polarity like left and right, a lot of people will say, go to the middle, take the middle road. And even people I respect, like Amanda Ellis says that. And I respect her a lot and value her opinions and all that. But we're allowed to have different opinions, right? But I don't think middle road, is necessarily the best advice. I think nuance is what we need to move into, right? Critical thinking. Let's bring back critical thinking. Because the political footballs, the like left and right sort of game is played out to me, right? So let's move into a space of nuance. So, how is this nuanced? So, it is child exploitation. It is something children should not be a part of. And so, a lot of people on the right are understandably upset that children have been exploited in this, that children have been sexualized in this movie. And then you have some other people who are arguing that the movie itself is shining a light on the sexualization that already exists, right? So they have to show those things because they're shining a light on like the problem at large. But this is not a middle ground. This is a nuanced perspective. Um, that's lazy directing. Uh, you really don't have to show young girls, young actors doing sexual things. You can tell that story in a different way. What do I mean by that? You can have them do a dance routine and only show like innocent moves, but when there are over sexualized moves, you can show like the audience faces, right? Like the parents like in disgust, or like perverts um, drooling, right? But you can show reactions to tell the same story. And this is not like a revolutionary directing technique. This has happened before. If we look at Hitchcock, Hitchcock does this a lot, where your imagination is even more vivid than anything you could see on than anything you can see visually, right? So if you want to tell a story about young girls being exploited and you exploit young girls in the process, that sort of cancels out your the theme of the movie, right? Because you're complicit in the same thing you're trying to like call out against, right? But you can still tell that story without showing children being sexualized. You can tell that story by showing reaction shots. And horror is great if you like the horror genre and sorry, if you like the horror genre and you want to um, make films in that genre, there is a road you can take, a trend of being gory, having shock value, all of that. But I really admire directors who creatively tell a story without showing every little detail, right? Because it engages the audience, right? You have to like use your discernment to be like, how are they dancing? Like, what moves are they doing? Um, so yeah, it's just a lazy director. And they might have some like latent pervy things to them if they're like willing to show children in that light. I also want to say that Cuties did take it too far. Like for real, if you did see that video, that clip, they did take it too far. But also, um, being in dance myself, we had some sexual moves, and they weren't overt. And then when you watch things like Dance Moms, then um, sorry, a friend just texted me. Um, um, he told me a funny. He was remembering a funny story. I won't. Sorry, I'm a little distracted. But he's like, we were talking about embarrassing things yesterday, and he's remembering a funny story. So I'm laughing about it in my head. Let's get back to Cuties. What was I even talking about? Oh, dance. So there were some sexual moves that I did as a child, although they weren't overtly sexual. When I rewatch Dance Moms from today's perspective, because I used to watch Dance Moms like first few seasons I was into it because I was in dance, right? I was in dance for almost 10 years. Wasn't quite 10 years, but it's a pretty big chunk in my life, and I loved it. And it was a great way to express myself athletically, right? And I kind of have fantasies of starting a like dance troupe. A grown up, like, just for fun dance troupe. If you're into that, let me know. Anyway, so I acknowledge that, like, children have a sexuality of their own. Like, as a kid, I had my own sexual curiosity, right? And it's like as simple as like playing doctor, seeing how you're different with a guy, with a boy. But understanding that sexuality is natural in children does not give like an adult the right to exploit that or to prey on that or to take that child's innocence, right? Because that child's sexuality is for him or her to explore and in a healthy, innocent way, right? To explore with their peers, to explore as they get older, as they get to high school, college, age appropriate times to explore your sexuality, right? But to pretend like it doesn't exist at all is a little naive. So that can be tricky, kind of complicated to explain to Americans. I think Europeans understand that better. And this is not like, I want to be clear, it's not advocating for pedophilia. Pedophilia is wrong. You are stealing a child's innocence. Really banging out the hot topics with these vlogs. I wanted to keep them relatively light, but every morning I wake up and I'm like, what am I going to talk about? What am I going to talk about? What am I going to talk about? Sometimes I have it planned, like the planets, but sometimes, most of the time, it's just like impromptu. So this is what has come through. That's okay. So being in dance, I have seen like sexual moves in children, but Cuties took it too far. So I understand the message they were trying to convey, which is like a problem that already exists, and it didn't really exist in my dance troupe, at least not from what I can remember. I'm thinking of a recital where we did the older girls in dance competition, they did Donna Summer's Bad Girls, and they dressed up like hookers. And we were, as like little kids, we like watched that show. But I didn't quite realize that they were hookers at the time, right? Because I was an innocent child. But like my dance numbers were like, my favorite one was a French maid. It was Beauty and the Beast, Be Our Guest. And we had this tray of fake food that like we used as a prop. And that was fun. That was my favorite dance routine, but there are many others, and they were really innocent. But it's not to say that exploitative moves were absent. Yeah. What else do I want to say? Netflix. So I have worked with Netflix for a number of companies, and I think another piece of nuance to this controversy is that their business model isn't really. Their business model concerns me because they greenlight a lot of projects and they sort of ran them through productions, and they don't really like scrutinize with a fine-tooth comb what a picture is going to be, right? It's just kind of like anything goes. Like, we're all creatives. You're free to do whatever you want. But they do over greenlight things, in my opinion. And this causes a lot of overwhelm down the pike because, like, the producer that I worked with, um, they had like health problems because they were so overworked and so overwhelmed by all of the projects that were in their wheelhouse that they like collapsed and had to go to the hospital. And like, I totally understand why. And she was a great, person to work with, but you can only take so much. And the projects I was managing were overwhelming to me. Going through sexual harassment and the toll it took on my mental health, I could not like hold all of the projects and the overwhelm from those projects, because we would have to sort of comb through like long emails. And I have mentioned this before, but that job, a lot of it had to deal with deadlines and dates, and you would just ask one simple question: when can you give me this? And they would write a freaking Jane Austen letter to you, and it's like, I did not have time to tell you about the weather or anything like that. Like, I have 80 different projects here, and I have to get this moving, right? Uh, so it was sort of a fish rots from the head down type of situation. And I love Netflix. I'm just like giving constructive criticism on the business model because I think they do over greenlight things. It leads to overwhelm. It leads to not taking a second look at choices that are wrong for the company ultimately, right? Because even though Cuties stirred up this controversy, it also runs the risk of getting subscriptions canceled, right? Because people don't want to be part of a streaming service that exploits children, right? But my guess with that project is this was something that was rammed through. This was a project that was greenlit without very much oversight. And then, it was just rammed through. And then when, and they over greenlight projects because they're trying to build up content. So they used to be sort of they used to buy up licenses and then sort of syndicate them, right? So with the whole DVD system, which still exists, and I had a boss at one of my jobs that still did the DVD system, which it was like, oh, you cute boomer. But like, I don't even have a DVD player. So DVD player. So they bought up all these licenses to have a library, but those licenses are things like, old shows, House of Cards, The Good Place, So they are greenlighting all these projects of new content so that it sets them apart from streaming services like Disney Plus and all of that. They're also investing heavily in international markets and international films. So if you are interested in foreign films, then Netflix is kind of the streaming service to go. But that's my opinion and why I think they greenlit that movie, because they just greenlight everything and they don't monitor that stuff, and they really overwhelm the rest of us with all of the projects that come down the pike. And you can't possibly filter all of those projects. Like, there were plenty of projects that like I was a little uncomfortable with. Well, not plenty. There were a couple that I was uncomfortable with. When I worked in subtitles, it's interesting because when you're working with different languages, some words are not acceptable in certain countries, right? So the C word, CUNT, see you next Tuesday. The C word in the US is a very offensive word, but in the UK, like they say it like every other word, right? So it's things like that. But also, when you get into different translations, you can run into that sort of thing, right? So might not be the same word, but they just don't they don't use derogatory terms to that group, right? And come on, brain, come on, brain. Subtitles, words. Hate when I'm on a roll and it just like the train stops. My train of thought just like grinds to a halt. I'll take a drink of coffee and see if it doesn't jolt my. Oh, okay. So some of the projects that I was uncomfortable with, they were movies with highly offensive characters, characters meant to be offensive, movies meant to be offensive. And so that was really difficult to translate sometimes because not everything is acceptable in every country, right? If like little things can be offensive in different countries, then the big things are definitely offensive. So this is sort of random piece of advice if you are looking to be a filmmaker, if especially a screenwriter. Producers want to know that they can sell your content to foreign markets because that's just more residuals. It's more like money that lives off of that content, right? So if you write an edgy movie, right, that has a lot of cussing, that has like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, then that lowers the chance of it being acceptable in other countries. And you could say stuff like, well, people make R-rated movies all the time, and that's true, but they're relatively inoffensive rated R movies, meaning it could be something like a mobster movie. I know violence is not offensive to a lot of people, sadly, but anyway. So, something like that is more universal than an edgy movie with like an offensive character who says the F word all the time. That sort of thing is you run into roadblocks and subtitles and licensing and ratings and just being able to sell to international markets. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on Netflix and Cuties. I hope you enjoyed it. Love you very much. I will see you tomorrow. Bye.